The iron shackles bit into Helena Dawson's wrists as she stood barefoot on the frozen cobblestones of Aure's central square, her breath forming white clouds in the bitter February air of 1884, while men with hungry eyes circled her like wolves around wounded prey. She had stopped shivering an hour ago, which terrified her more than the cold itself. Her thin cotton dress, torn at the shoulder and stained with mud from the journey, offered no protection against the mountain wind that swept down from the San Juan peaks. Around her, perhaps 24 men had gathered, their voices a low rumble of speculation and crude assessment. The auctioneer, a pot-bellied man named Silas Crow with tobacco-stained teeth, stood on a wooden platform hammering his gavel against a makeshift podium. "Gentlemen, gentlemen," Crow called out, his voice carrying across the square despite the wind. "We have here one Helena Dawson, age 22, recently orphaned and in possession of debts totaling $372. As per Colorado territorial law regarding indentured servitude for debt settlement, this woman's labor contract is now available for purchase. The winning bidder assumes her debts and gains 7 years of contracted service. Shall we start the bidding at $50? Helena forced herself to stand straight, though her legs trembled. This could not be happening. 3 weeks ago, she had been living peacefully in her family's small ranch 15 miles outside of Aure with her father. Then the fever had taken him, swift and merciless, and she had discovered the truth buried in his desk drawer. Gambling debts, loans from half the businessmen in town, promissory notes signed in moments of desperation, when the silver mines had laid off workers and the ranch had produced nothing but dust. She had tried to sell the ranch, but it was mortgaged twice over. She had tried to find work, but no respectable establishment would hire a woman alone without references. And then Crow had arrived with the sheriff and the paperwork, all legal and binding, explaining that her choices were simple: accept indentured servitude or go to debtor's prison in Denver. $50, called out a voice from the crowd. Helena recognized him as Marcus Webb, who owned the saloon on Main Street. He was perhaps 60 years old with wandering hands and a reputation for cruelty toward his employees. "60, countered another man, younger, with a scar across his cheek. The bidding continued, each number another nail in the coffin of her freedom. Helena scanned the crowd, trying to memorize the faces of the men who saw her as property to be purchased. Most were locals, miners and merchants she had seen in passing on her infrequent trips to town. Some were strangers, drawn by the spectacle or the opportunity. Then her eyes caught on someone standing apart from the main group, leaning against the post outside the general store. He was tall, maybe in his mid-20s, with dark hair that fell past his collar beneath a weathered Stetson. He wore a long duster coat over denim and leather, and even from this distance, she could see the twin revolvers at his hips. But it was his face that held her attention. Where the other men wore expressions of greed or lust, his face was unreadable, almost sad. He was not bidding, just watching with gray eyes that seemed to take in everything. $120, Webb called out, and several of the other bidders shook their heads and stepped back. That was more than most men in Aure made in 3 months. $125, the scarred man said, but his voice lacked conviction. Crow raised his gavel. $125, going once. Helena felt bile rise in her throat. 7 years with the scarred man, whose name she did not even know. 7 years of servitude, of whatever he demanded of her. She closed her eyes, sending up a prayer to a God she was no longer certain was listening, going twice. The gavel began its descent. $500. The voice cut through the cold air like a rifle shot, deep and clear and completely unexpected. Every head turned toward the speaker. It was the man in the duster, now stepping away from the post and walking toward the platform with measured strides. His hand was not on his weapons, but there was something in the way he moved that made the crowd part before him. Crow nearly dropped his gavel. "I beg your pardon, $500, the stranger repeated, reaching the platform. "Cash. I will pay Miss Dawson's debts in full and purchase her contract." Helena stared at him, her heart hammering. $500 was a fortune. It was more than her father's debts. It was more than the ranch had been worth. Why would anyone pay such a sum? "Now hold on," Webb protested, pushing forward. "That is irregular. The bidding was at $125. "And now it is at $500, the stranger said calmly. He looked up at Crow. "Do you accept my bid or not?" Crow licked his lips, calculating. "Well, I suppose, if you have the money actually available." The stranger reached inside his coat and produced a leather wallet. From it, he counted out bills with practiced ease, placing them on the podium in neat stacks. Helena watched, mesmerized. That much money just carried casually in a coat pocket. Who was this man? "There is $520, the stranger said. $500 for the contract and debts, $20 for your trouble and fees." Crow counted the money twice, his fingers shaking slightly. "This is most irregular, but I suppose all is in order. The contract is yours, Mr. Zachary Orion," the man said. He did not offer to shake hands. Right then, Crow banged his gavel. "Sold to Mr. Zachary Orion for $500. The debts of Helena Dawson are hereby transferred, and her 7-year labor contract is now the property of said Zachary Orion as per territorial law." The crowd began to disperse, some grumbling, others simply moving on to the next entertainment. Webb shot Zachary a look of pure venom before stalking away. Helena stood frozen on the platform, unsure what to do or say. Zachary climbed the steps and approached her, pulling a key from his pocket. "Those shackles look painful," he said quietly, reaching for her wrists. Helena flinched involuntarily and he paused. "I am not going to hurt you," he said, and something in his voice made her believe him. She held out her hands, and he unlocked the iron cuffs with gentle efficiency. The metal fell away, revealing raw, red skin beneath. Zachary frowned at the sight, then shrugged off his duster coat. "You are freezing," he said, draping the coat over her shoulders. It was heavy and warm, carrying the scent of leather and sage and wood smoke. "Can you walk?" Helena nodded, not trusting her voice. Her feet were numb, possibly frostbitten, but she forced them to move as she descended the platform steps. Zachary stayed close but did not touch her, which she appreciated. At the bottom, she swayed slightly and he caught her elbow to steady her. "There is a hotel just across the square," he said. "We should get you inside and warmed up before we discuss anything else." "Can you make it that far?" "I think so," Helena managed, her voice hoarse from the cold. "Why did you do that? $500. You do not even know me." Zachary was quiet for a moment as they began walking slowly across the cobblestones. "I know enough," he finally said. "I know you are a human being who deserves better than to be sold like cattle in a town square. The rest we can figure out later." The hotel was small but respectable, a 2-story building with a fireplace in the lobby. The clerk behind the desk, a thin woman in her 40s, looked up with obvious curiosity as they entered. She had surely witnessed the auction from her window. "I need a room," Zachary said, approaching the desk, "with a fireplace, and send up hot water for a bath, food, and anything you might have for frostbite treatment." The clerk glanced at Helena, wrapped in the oversized coat, and her expression shifted to something like pity. "Of course. Room 7, top of the stairs and to the left. I will have everything sent up right away." Zachary paid for the room and guided Helena upstairs. The room was modest but clean, with a large bed, a fireplace already laid with wood, and a washstand in the corner. He immediately set about lighting the fire, coaxing the kindling to life with practiced movements. Helena stood in the middle of the room, still wearing his coat, unsure what was expected of her. This man had just purchased her contract. Legally, she belonged to him for the next 7 years. She knew what men expected of women they owned, had heard the stories whispered among the ranch wives. Her stomach twisted with fear and resignation. "Sit down before you fall down," Zachary said without looking up from the fire. "There are chairs by the window." She sat watching him. The fire caught and began to spread warmth through the room. Zachary stood, brushing his hands on his pants, then pulled the second chair over and sat facing her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I imagine you have questions," he said. Helena laughed, a broken sound that bordered on hysteria. "Questions? I have nothing but questions. Who are you? Why did you pay $500 for a contract that was about to sell for a quarter of that? What do you expect from me? What happens now?" Zachary leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "Fair enough. I am Zachary Orion, originally from Texas. I have been working as a ranch hand and occasionally as a hired gun when the work requires it. I have been in Colorado for about 2 years, mostly up in the mountains. I came into our array this morning to resupply and happened to see the notice about the auction. When I saw what was happening, what they were doing to you, I could not walk away." "But $500, Helena protested. "That is a fortune." "I had a good year," Zachary said simply. "I found work with a wealthy rancher east of here, helping to move cattle and dealing with some trouble from rustlers. He paid well. The money was just sitting in a bank in Denver, not doing anyone any good. You spent your entire savings on a stranger." "I spent my money on something that mattered," Zachary corrected. "Now, as for what I expect from you, the answer is nothing beyond what you choose to give freely. I am not going to enforce that contract, Helena. You are not my property, and I am not going to treat you like you are." Helena stared at him, trying to process his words. "I do not understand." A knock at the door interrupted them. Zachary rose and opened it, allowing 2 hotel workers to enter with a large copper tub, buckets of steaming water, towels, a tray of food, and a small jar of salve. They set everything up efficiently and departed with Zachary's thanks and a generous tip. Once they were alone again, Zachary gestured to the tub. "You need to get warm and tend to those injuries. I am going to step out and give you privacy. Take your time, eat something, and we will talk more later. There are clean towels there, and I will have the clerk send up some proper clothes if you give me your measurements." "Wait," Helena said as he moved toward the door. "I still do not understand what you want from me." Zachary paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Right now, I want you to get warm, get fed, and get some rest. Beyond that, I want you to have choices. You did not have any this morning. Now you do. We will figure out the details together, but I give you my word that I will not hurt you or force you into anything. You are safe. That is all you need to know for now." He left before she could respond, closing the door gently behind him. Helena sat in stunned silence for a long moment, then slowly rose and approached the tub. The water was still steaming, and the sight of it nearly made her cry. She shed the ruined dress and Zachary's coat, then sank into the heat with a gasp of relief and pain as feeling returned to her frozen limbs. As she soaked, she examined the situation from every angle. Zachary seemed sincere, but she had learned the hard way that seeming and being were often 2 different things. Men lied. Men took what they wanted, and yet he had left her alone when he could have stayed. He had given her his coat, paid for her comfort, promised her safety. Either he was genuine, or he was playing a long game she did not yet understand. The salve helped with her wrists and feet, soothing the raw skin. The food was simple but delicious, thick stew and fresh bread that she ate ravenously. By the time she had finished, exhaustion was pulling at her like a tide. She wrapped herself in a clean towel and approached the bed, then hesitated. Where would Zachary sleep? This was the only room. She was still debating this when another knock came. "It is me," Zachary's voice called. "I have some clothes for you. I will leave them outside the door." Helena waited until she heard his footsteps retreat, then cracked the door and retrieved the bundle. Inside was a simple but serviceable dress in dark blue wool, undergarments, stockings, and a warm shawl. Everything was new and of good quality. She dressed quickly, marveling at how the clothes fit reasonably well. Zachary must have given the clerk very accurate estimates. When she was decent, she opened the door. Zachary was sitting in the hallway, his back against the wall, reading a newspaper. He looked up and stood when he saw her. "Better?" he asked. "Much," Helena admitted. "Thank you for everything." Zachary folded the newspaper and tucked it under his arm. "Good. Listen, I know you must be exhausted and we need to have some serious discussions, but those can wait until tomorrow. You should sleep. I am going to get another room down the hall." "You do not have to do that," Helena said, surprising herself. "I mean, you already paid for this room and it has 2 chairs. I do not want to cost you more money after everything." "I have money for another room," Zachary assured her. "I know, but it seems wasteful." Helena pulled the shawl tighter around herself. "I trust you to keep your word about not forcing anything. If you want to sleep in here in the chair or even just on the floor by the fire, I would not object. You gave me your coat in the freezing square. The least I can do is share the room you paid for." Zachary studied her for a long moment. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel obligated or uncomfortable." "I am certain," Helena said, and realized she meant it. There was something about this man that made her instincts trust him, despite everything she had learned about trusting men. Besides, if we are going to figure things out together, as you said, we will need to learn to be in the same room eventually. A small smile crossed Zachary's face, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his features, making him look younger and less guarded. "That is sound logic. All right then. Let me just get my bedroll from the livery. I will be back in a few minutes." He returned with a worn bedroll and saddlebags, along with a second dinner from the hotel dining room. Helena was already in the bed, propped up against the pillows, trying to stay awake. She watched as Zachary spread his bedroll in front of the fire, moving with the efficient grace of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. "Tell me about yourself," she said as he settled down with his dinner. "It seems like I should know something about the man who bought my contract." Zachary paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "Not much to tell. I grew up on a ranch outside of San Antonio. My parents died when I was 16, killed in a Comanche raid. I drifted for a while after that, working wherever I could find it. Cattle drives, ranch work, sometime as a deputy in Kansas. Eventually made my way to Colorado because I heard the mountains were beautiful and there was work in the mining camps." "You like it here?" Helena asked. "I do," Zachary said. "It is different from Texas. Colder, obviously, but there is something about the mountains that feels right. Like you can breathe deeper up here. What about you? How did you end up in our?" Helena told him about her childhood in Missouri, how her mother had died when she was young, how her father had brought her west chasing rumors of silver strikes and opportunities, how they had tried to make a go of the ranch, how her father had been a good man but a poor businessman, how the debts had piled up without her knowledge. "He was trying to protect me," she said softly, "from the worry, from the truth of how bad things were. I think he always believed he could turn it around, make one good strike or have one good season. He never did." "I am sorry," Zachary said, and he sounded like he meant it. Losing a parent is hard. Losing them and then having to deal with the aftermath alone is harder. They talked late into the night, the conversation flowing more easily than Helena would have expected. Zachary had a dry sense of humor and a thoughtful way of speaking that she appreciated. He told her stories about his travels, about the strange characters he had met and the beautiful places he had seen. She found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in weeks. Eventually, exhaustion won. Helena fell asleep mid-conversation, her words trailing off into silence. Zachary noticed and quietly banked the fire, then settled into his own bedroll. His last thought before sleep took him was that Helena Dawson had a beautiful laugh, and he hoped to hear it again soon. Morning came with pale sunlight filtering through the window. Helena woke to find Zachary already up, sitting in one of the chairs and cleaning his revolvers with methodical precision. He looked up when he heard her stir. "Morning," he said. "I took the liberty of ordering breakfast. It should be up soon." Helena sat up, still wearing the dress she had fallen asleep in. "What time is it?" "About 8. I let you sleep. Figured you needed it." Breakfast arrived shortly after, along with coffee that tasted like heaven. They ate together, the silence comfortable rather than awkward. When they had finished, Zachary pushed his plate aside and leaned forward, his expression serious. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said. "I meant what I said yesterday. I am not going to enforce that contract. You are not obligated to work for me or serve me or anything like that. But we need to figure out a practical plan for your future." "I do not have many options," Helena said bitterly. "No money, no property, no family. Even if you tear up that contract, I am still in the same position I was in before the auction." "Not exactly," Zachary said. "Your father's debts are paid. That means you are free of that burden. As for money and options, I have an idea, but I want your honest opinion on it." Helena waited, curious. "I own a small ranch about 60 miles north of here in the valley near Ridgway," Zachary said. "It is not much, just a cabin and about 200 acres, but the land is good and there is water. I bought it last year with the intention of settling down eventually, but I have been too busy with other work to do much with it. The cabin is livable but needs work. The land needs work. Everything needs work, honestly." "And," Helena prompted. "And I need help," Zachary said simply. "Real help, not indentured labor. I am proposing a partnership. You come to the ranch, help me get it running properly. In exchange, you get a home, food, safety, and a share of any profits we make. 50-50 split on everything the ranch earns. After a year, if you want to leave, I will give you your half and you can use it to start fresh somewhere else. If you want to stay, we continue the partnership." Helena blinked. "That is incredibly generous, too generous. What is the catch?" "No catch," Zachary said. "I need the help and you need a situation. It makes practical sense. We would have separate sleeping quarters. I would build a wall in the cabin to divide it, or I could sleep in the barn until we can build a second structure. Your work would be ranch work, cooking, tending animals, maybe a garden. Nothing you would not expect on any normal ranch, and you would have complete freedom to leave anytime you want. I just ask that if you do decide to leave, you give me some notice so I can make arrangements." Helena studied him, trying to find the deception or the hidden agenda. "Why are you doing this, really? No one is this kind without wanting something in return." Zachary met her eyes steadily. "You want the truth." "I watched my mother die scared and alone because my father was not there to protect her. I watched raiders drag her from our home, and I was too young and too far away to stop it. When I saw you standing in that square, terrified and freezing, being sold like an animal, I saw her. I saw every woman who has ever been powerless in a situation created by men. I cannot fix what happened to my mother, but I could do something about what was happening to you. So I did." The raw honesty in his voice made Helena's throat tight. "I am sorry about your mother." "And I am sorry about your father," Zachary said. "We have both lost people. But we are both still here, still alive, and we can either help each other or go our separate ways into uncertain futures. I would prefer the former, but I will respect whatever you decide." Helena thought about her options. She could refuse Zachary's offer, but then what? She had no money, no prospects, no place to go. She could try to find work in Auray, but the auction had marked her in the eyes of the town. She would always be the woman who had been sold in the square. Or she could take a chance on this strange, kind cowboy who seemed to genuinely want nothing more than partnership and companionship. "I have one condition," she said finally. "Name it." "You teach me to shoot," Helena said. "A rifle, a pistol, whatever. If I am going to be living on a remote ranch, I want to be able to protect myself. I do not want to ever feel helpless again." Zachary's face broke into that rare smile. "Deal. I will teach you everything I know, so you will come." Helena took a deep breath and nodded. "I will come." Partners, 50-50 split, with the freedom to leave if it does not work out. Zachary stood and extended his hand. Helena rose and shook it, his grip firm but not crushing. "Partners," he agreed. They spent the rest of the day in Auray preparing for the journey north. Zachary purchased supplies and a sturdy mare for Helena to ride. He also commissioned a local carpenter to prepare materials for dividing the cabin, which would be delivered to the ranch within 2 weeks. Helena watched him work, impressed by his efficiency and the respect he commanded from the shopkeepers despite his youth. They left Auray the following morning, riding north through spectacular mountain scenery. The winter landscape was harsh but beautiful, all snow-covered peaks and frozen rivers. Zachary set a moderate pace, checking frequently to make sure Helena was comfortable and warm. They camped one night under the stars, Zachary showing her how to build a proper fire and make coffee in a tin pot. "Tell me about the ranch," Helena said as they sat by the fire that night, wrapped in blankets against the cold. "It is in a valley that runs alongside the Uncompahgre River," Zachary said, his eyes reflecting the flames. "The previous owner was a prospector who built the cabin but then abandoned it when he did not find silver. I bought it from the land office for almost nothing. The cabin is solid, one large room with a loft. There is a small barn, big enough for 4 horses and some supplies. The land has good grass in the summer, and there is plenty of water. I am thinking cattle, maybe some horses. We could also do a large garden, sell vegetables to the mining camps." "Have you run a ranch before?" Helena asked. "Worked on them my whole life," Zachary said. "Never owned one, but I know what needs doing." "Have you done ranch work?" "Some," Helena said. "My father's place was small, but I know how to tend animals, grow vegetables, preserve food. I can cook, clean, so all the usual things. I have never worked with cattle, though." "I will teach you," Zachary said. "Same as the shooting. We will learn together." They reached the ranch late the following afternoon. Helena's first view of it came as they crested a ridge and looked down into the valley below. The cabin was exactly as Zachary had described, a small log structure with a stone chimney, situated near the river with the barn about 50 yards away. The land spread out around it in gentle slopes, currently covered in snow but clearly good grazing land underneath. "It is beautiful," Helena said, and meant it. There was something peaceful about the valley, something that felt far removed from the chaos and cruelty of the world. "It is home," Zachary said simply. "Come on, let's get you inside and warm." The cabin's interior was sparse but clean. Zachary had clearly made an effort to prepare it before leaving for Auray. There was a large stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a sturdy bed in one corner, and a ladder leading to the loft. Shelves lined one wall, holding supplies and cooking equipment. It was rustic, but it was warm and dry and safe. "I will take the loft," Zachary said, already moving his bedroll toward the ladder. "You take the bed. Once the carpenter's supplies arrive, we will build a proper wall and maybe a second room eventually." Helena explored the cabin while Zachary started a fire and began preparing dinner. She found everything organized and practical, evidence of a man who lived alone and took care of his own needs. There were books on one shelf, which surprised and pleased her. She pulled one down and found it was a collection of poetry by Walt Whitman. "You read poetry?" she asked, holding up the book. Zachary glanced over from the pot he was stirring. "My mother taught me to read with poetry, said it was important to feed the soul as well as the body. I like Whitman. He writes about the frontier, about freedom and the open spaces. Feels true." They ate dinner together at the small table, venison stew that Zachary had made from meat he had stored in the cold cellar. It was good, surprisingly good, and Helena said so. "When you live alone, you learn to cook or you starve," Zachary said with a shrug. "I am no expert, but I can make the basics. I am hoping you might be better at it than me." "I can cook," Helena assured him. "My father loved my biscuits. Said they were the best thing about coming home after a long day." They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Zachary was true to his word about teaching Helena to shoot. Every afternoon, he would set up targets behind the barn and patiently instruct her on stance, breathing, and trigger control. Helena proved to be a natural, her hands steady and her eyes sharp. Within a week, she could hit a target at 50 yards with the rifle. The pistol took longer, but Zachary was a patient teacher. "You are doing great," he said one afternoon as she successfully hit 3 bottles in a row. "Better than I was when I started. You have the right temperament for it, calm and focused." Helena lowered the pistol, smiling at the praise. "I like it. I like feeling capable, like I could protect myself if I needed to." "You can," Zachary said seriously. "Never doubt that." The carpenter's supplies arrived as promised, and Zachary spent a week building a wall down the center of the cabin, creating 2 separate rooms. Helena's side had the fireplace and the main door. Zachary's side had the window and access to the loft, which he converted into storage. He built a second bed for himself, along with a privacy screen. When it was finished, they each had their own space while still sharing the main living area. As winter gradually gave way to early spring, they worked together to prepare the ranch for the coming season. Zachary purchased 20 head of cattle from a rancher to the east, young stock that would grow and breed. Helena started a garden, working the soil and planning what to plant. They repaired fences, cleaned the barn, and made 100 small improvements to the property. Through it all, they talked. Long conversations about everything and nothing. Helena learned that Zachary had once wanted to be a school teacher before his parents died, that he loved thunderstorms and hated snakes, that he had a sister somewhere in Louisiana he had not seen in 5 years. Zachary learned that Helena could speak passable Spanish, that she had once seen a traveling opera company in St. Louis and loved it, that she dreamed of visiting San Francisco someday. The attraction grew slowly, naturally, like a seed taking root. Helena found herself watching Zachary as he worked, admiring the strength in his shoulders, the gentleness in his hands when he tended the animals. Zachary caught himself making excuses to be near Helena, to hear her laugh, to see the way the sunlight caught in her auburn hair. One evening in late April, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Helena finally acknowledged what she had been feeling for weeks. "Zachary," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." He looked over at her, concern flickering in his gray eyes. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. That is actually the problem, or maybe not a problem, but definitely a complication." Helena took a breath, gathering her courage. "When you brought me here, you said we were partners. You have treated me with more respect and kindness than anyone in my life. You have given me safety, purpose, and a home. And somewhere along the way, I have developed feelings for you. Romantic feelings. I understand if that makes things awkward or if you do not feel the same way. I just needed to be honest because I do not want to lie or hide it anymore." Zachary was silent for a long moment, staring out at the mountains. Helena's heart sank, interpreting his silence as rejection. Then he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "I bought you a horse in our array," he said, seemingly changing the subject. "Do you remember?" Helena blinked, confused. "Yes, of course. The mare. I told the stable master I needed a gentle horse, something steady and reliable. He showed me 3 options. 2 were younger, flashier, probably faster. The third was your mare, older, calmer, not as impressive. I picked her because I thought she would make you feel safe. Because even then, after knowing you for less than a day, making you feel safe mattered to me more than anything else." He finally turned to look at her, and his eyes were intense. "I have been falling for you since the moment I saw you in that square, Helena. Every day since has just made it deeper, but I did not say anything because I did not want you to feel pressured or obligated. You came here as my partner, not my wife or my sweetheart. I did not want to take advantage of the situation." Relief and joy flooded through Helena in equal measure. "You are not taking advantage. I am telling you freely how I feel." "And I am telling you freely how I feel," Zachary said. He reached over and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I love you, Helena Dawson. I think I have from the start. But I want to do this right. I want to court you properly if you will let me, not as your employer or your creditor or anything like that. Just as a man who thinks you are the most remarkable woman he has ever met." Helena felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I would like that very much." Zachary lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Then we will take it slow. Get to know each other as something more than friends and partners. And if it works, if we both feel the same way in a few months, maybe we talk about something more permanent." "Does that sound all right?" "It sounds perfect," Helena whispered. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Helena had experienced. Zachary courted her with wildflowers picked from the meadow, with small gifts carved from wood in the evenings, with poetry read aloud by firelight. He was respectful of her space and her boundaries, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. But there were moments, stolen touches and long looks, that spoke of the passion waiting beneath the surface. One warm evening in May, as they walked along the river after dinner, Zachary stopped suddenly and turned to face her. "What is it?" Helena asked, searching his face. "I have been thinking about the future," Zachary said. "About what I want, what we are building here, and I realized something. I do not want to wait anymore. Not because I am impatient, but because I am certain. I know what I feel for you is real and lasting. I know I want to spend my life with you. So I am just going to ask, and if it is too soon, you can tell me to ask again later." He dropped to one knee in the grass, pulling a simple gold band from his pocket. "Helena Dawson, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my true partner in everything we do? Will you build this life with me, not as an employee or an obligation, but as the woman I love more than anything in this world?" Helena could not speak past the lump in her throat. She nodded frantically, then found her voice. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." Zachary stood and slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that was both tender and passionate, full of promise and hope. When they finally broke apart, Both were breathless and smiling. "Where did you get the ring?" Helena asked, admiring the simple band. "I rode into Ridgway last week while you were working on the garden," Zachary admitted. "I have been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment. I was going to wait longer, do something more romantic, but standing here with you, with the sunset and the river and everything we have built together, this felt like the right moment." "It was perfect," Helena assured him. They were married a week later by a traveling preacher who made a circuit through the mountain valleys. The ceremony was simple, held in the cabin with just the preacher and two neighbors Zachary had befriended as witnesses. Helena wore a new dress, pale yellow like sunshine, that Zachary had commissioned from a seamstress in Ridgway. Zachary wore his best clothes, his hair neatly trimmed, looking more handsome than Helena had ever seen him. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed her with a reverence that made her feel cherished beyond measure. The neighbors departed after a simple meal, leaving the newlyweds alone. That night, Zachary was gentle and patient, making Helena's first time an experience of love rather than obligation or fear. He worshipped her body with hands and lips, whispering how beautiful she was, how much he loved her, how lucky he was. Helena had heard stories from other women about the wedding night, most of them grim or embarrassing. Her experience was nothing like that. It was tender and passionate and perfect, a physical expression of the emotional bond they had built. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in bed, Zachary traced idle patterns on her shoulder. "You remember what I said that day in our array?" he asked quietly. "When I bought your contract, you said a lot of things," Helena murmured, drowsy and content. "I said the money was not doing anyone any good sitting in a bank, that I spent it on something that mattered." Zachary pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I want you to know that I would pay 1,000 times that amount, give up everything I own if it meant having you in my life. That day in the square you were being sold as if you had a price. But you do not, you never did, you are priceless, Helena, then and now and always." Helena felt tears slip down her cheeks. "You saved me that day, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Zachary corrected gently. "I was just drifting before you, working and surviving but not really living. You gave me purpose, gave me a reason to build something lasting. We are partners in every sense of the word, and I would not have it any other way." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, warm and safe and deeply in love. The months that followed were filled with hard work and happiness. The ranch thrived under their combined efforts. The cattle grew fat on summer grass. The garden produced an abundance of vegetables that Helena preserved for winter and sold to the mining camps. They purchased chickens and pigs, diversifying their operation. Zachary proved to be a shrewd businessman, negotiating good prices for their livestock and produce. True to his word, he split all profits equally with Helena, though she protested that as his wife her money was his money. The deal was 50-50, Zachary insisted. "Wife or not, you are still my partner. Your work is worth just as much as mine." They made improvements to the property throughout the summer and fall. Zachary built a proper chicken coop and a smokehouse. Helena created a root cellar for storing vegetables. They added onto the cabin, building a separate bedroom that gave them more privacy and space. In late summer, Helena began to suspect she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Zachary, nervous about his reaction despite knowing he would be thrilled. She chose a quiet evening after dinner, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the meadow. "Zachary, I have news," she said, taking his hand. He looked at her, immediately alert to the seriousness in her tone. "What kind of news? The good kind, I hope. I am with child. You are going to be a father." For a moment, Zachary just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around before gently setting her down. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Helena, this is the best news in the world." "You are happy then?" Helena asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Zachary said, kneeling down and pressing his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I am your father, and I promise I am going to do everything in my power to give you a good life and keep you safe." Helena ran her fingers through his dark hair, her heart full to bursting. This man, who had rescued her from despair and shown her what true partnership looked like, was going to be the father of her child. She could not imagine anything more right. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and into winter. Zachary became even more protective, insisting Helena rest more and avoid heavy work. Helena grumbled about being coddled but secretly loved his attentiveness. He read to her every evening, everything from poetry to adventure novels, his hand resting on her growing belly. The baby came in early March during a late winter storm. The midwife from Ridgway had been staying with them for a week, waiting for signs of labor. When Helena's water broke, Zachary paced the cabin like a caged animal, desperate to help but relegated to boiling water and fetching supplies. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Zachary stayed close, holding Helena's hand when she needed it, whispering encouragement and love. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with dark hair and strong lungs, Zachary cried openly. "A son," the midwife said, placing the cleaned and wrapped infant in Helena's arms. "Congratulations." Helena gazed down at her son, overwhelmed with love and exhaustion. The baby had Zachary's dark hair and her green eyes, a perfect blend of both of them. Zachary knelt beside the bed, his hand gentle on the baby's head. "He is perfect," Zachary whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Helena. Thank you for this gift." They named him Henry after Helena's father with the middle name Zachary. Little Henry Zachary Orion proved to be a content baby, sleeping well and eating enthusiastically. Zachary was a devoted father, rising in the night to bring Henry to Helena for feeding, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours just holding his son and talking to him about the ranch and the world. As spring arrived and Helena recovered her strength, they settled into a new rhythm as a family. The ranch work continued, now with Henry sleeping in a basket nearby or strapped to Helena's back in a carrier Zachary had made. The cattle business was thriving, and they were able to hire a local teenager to help with some of the heavier work, giving them more time to focus on their growing family. One evening in late spring, as they sat on the porch watching Henry practice crawling on a blanket, Helena reflected on how much had changed in just over a year. "You ever think about that day?" she asked quietly. "In our ray in the square?" "Sometimes," Zachary admitted, "but not with regret. With gratitude. If circumstances had been different, I never would have met you. We would not have this life, this family. I would not wish those circumstances on anyone, but I cannot regret where they led us." "I used to have nightmares about it," Helena confessed. "About being sold, about what could have happened if you had not been there, but I have not had one in months. I think I finally feel safe enough to let it go." Zachary reached over and took her hand. "You are safe. You and Henry both. I will make sure of that for the rest of my life." The years passed in a blur of seasons and milestones. Henry grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved helping his father with the horses and learning about the ranch. When he was 3, Helena gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, with auburn hair and her mother's gentle temperament. 2 years after that came another son, Samuel, who had his father's gray eyes and adventurous spirit. The ranch expanded and prospered. They bought more land, increased their herd, and built a larger house to accommodate their growing family. Zachary proved to be as devoted a father as he was a husband, spending hours teaching his children to ride, to shoot, to appreciate the beauty of the mountains. Helena created a home filled with love, laughter, and learning, teaching the children their letters and numbers while also ensuring they understood the value of hard work. In the evenings, when the children were asleep, Zachary and Helena would often sit together on the porch of their home, watching the stars emerge over the mountains. Sometimes they talked about the day's work or plans for the future. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, content in each other's presence. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary surprised Helena with a trip to San Francisco, arranging for neighbors to watch the children for 2 weeks. It was Helena's first time seeing the ocean, and Zachary delighted in her wonder and excitement. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate at fine restaurants, attended the opera that Helena had dreamed of seeing again. It was a magical 2 weeks, a reminder that they were not just parents and ranchers but also lovers and best friends. On the ship returning home, standing at the rail and watching the coastline, Helena turned to Zachary. "You remember what you said to me that day?" she asked. "After you bought my contract," Zachary smiled, knowing exactly what she meant. "I said, now you are priceless." "I think about that a lot," Helena said. "About how you saw value in me when I felt worthless, how you gave me choices when I had none. How you loved me when I did not think I deserved to be loved." "You always deserved it," Zachary said firmly. "I just had the privilege of being the one to show you." "I want our children to know that story," Helena said. "Not the painful parts, not the details of the auction or the desperation, but the important parts. That love can be found in the darkest places. That one person's kindness can change everything. That everyone has value, regardless of their circumstances." "We will tell them," Zachary promised, "when they are old enough to understand." They kept that promise. As the children grew older, Zachary and Helena shared the story of how they met, framed as a tale of courage and love triumphing over hardship. Henry, Rose, and Samuel grew up understanding the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect, of standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. Henry eventually took over much of the ranch operations, displaying his father's business sense and work ethic. Rose, who had inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's determination, became a teacher in Ridgway, educating the children of miners and ranchers. Samuel, the adventurous one, joined the territorial rangers, protecting settlers and keeping the peace in the wild territories. As Zachary and Helena grew older, they gradually stepped back from the daily operations of the ranch, content to let the next generation take the lead. They spent their days tending a smaller garden, playing with grandchildren, and enjoying the life they had built together. One summer evening, when Zachary was 50 and Helena was 48, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Their hair was graying now, their hands marked by decades of hard work, but their love had only deepened with time. "No regrets?" Zachary asked, as he had periodically over the years. "Not a single one," Helena answered, as she always did. "You gave me everything I never knew I needed. A home, a family, a purpose, love that never wavers." "You gave me the same," Zachary said, "plus 3 incredible children and more grandchildren than I can keep track of." "6," Helena said with a laugh. "We have 6 grandchildren, see, too many to count." Zachary grinned, then grew more serious. "I meant what I said that day, you know. You are priceless. You were then in that freezing square with nothing but the clothes on your back. And you are now, with silver in your hair and our life's work spread out before us. The value of a person is not in what they own or what they can produce. It is in who they are, in the love they give and receive. You taught me that. I think you knew it all along, Helena said softly. That is why you stopped, why you paid everything you had for a stranger, because you already understood that truth. They sat in peaceful silence as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Around them, the ranch hummed with quiet life. Cattle lowed in the distance. A horse whinnied in the barn. Somewhere inside the house, they could hear their daughter-in-law singing as she prepared dinner. I would do it again, Zachary said suddenly. If I could go back to that day with the knowledge of everything that came after, I would still walk up to that platform and pay every cent I had. Because you, Helena, you were worth everything. You still are. Helena leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. And I would say yes again. To coming to the ranch, to marrying you, to building this life. Every choice that led us here, I would make them all again in a heartbeat. As darkness fell and the stars began to emerge, they remained on the porch, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful from the ashes of despair. The ranch stretched out around them, a testament to their hard work and dedication. But more than that, it was a testament to love, to the power of choosing compassion over indifference, of seeing worth where others saw none. In the years that followed, Zachary and Helena continued to be pillars of their community. They were known for their generosity, often hiring drifters and giving second chances to those society had written off. They never forgot where they had come from or how close Helena had come to a very different fate. When Zachary was 58, he fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. For weeks, Helena nursed him with the same devotion he had shown her during their childbirth and illnesses. She sat by his bedside, reading his favorite poetry, reminding him of all the reasons he had to fight. "You cannot leave me yet," she whispered one night when his fever was at its worst. "We still have so much living to do, grandchildren to watch grow up, sunsets to see together. I am not ready to do this without you." Whether it was her words or his own stubborn will, Zachary pulled through. The recovery was slow, but by spring he was back on his feet, though a bit weaker than before. The illness had scared them both, a reminder that their time was precious and finite. "I want to make sure everything is in order," Zachary said one evening as they sat together in their bedroom. "The ranch, the property, all of it. I want to make sure you and the children are provided for." "We will be fine," Helena assured him, though she understood his need to plan. They spent the next weeks updating their will, ensuring the ranch would be divided fairly among their children, and that Helena would be secure for the rest of her life. But Zachary had one more surprise planned. On their 25th wedding anniversary, he took Helena on another trip, this time to Denver. There, in a lawyer's office, he presented her with papers that made her a full legal owner of the ranch, not just through marriage but in her own right. "When I bought your contract all those years ago, I paid for your freedom," Zachary explained. "But legally, even though we were partners, even though we married, the ranch was always in my name. I am correcting that now. This is your ranch as much as mine. Not because you are my wife, but because you earned it through decades of hard work and dedication." Helena was moved to tears. "You never had to do this." "I know," Zachary said, "but I wanted to. I wanted there to be no question, legal or otherwise, that you are an equal owner of everything we built, that your name stands beside mine on the deed and in the records." They celebrated their anniversary in style, staying in Denver's finest hotel and attending a concert at the Opera House. But the real gift was the paperwork, the legal recognition of what they had always known in their hearts. They were true partners in every sense. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. They lost friends to age and illness. They celebrated the marriages of their children and the births of more grandchildren. The ranch remained prosperous, now one of the most successful operations in the region. Zachary and Helena's reputation for fair dealing and kindness had made them respected throughout Colorado. One autumn afternoon, when Zachary was 63 and Helena was 61, they decided to ride out to the spot where Zachary had proposed all those years ago. The river still flowed clear and cold, and the grass was golden with the changing season. They sat together on the bank, holding hands and remembering. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if I had not been in our ray that day?" Zachary asked. Helena considered the question seriously. "Sometimes, but I try not to dwell on it. The what-ifs can drive you mad. I prefer to focus on what actually happened. You were there. You did stop. You changed everything." "I think you would have survived regardless," Zachary said. "Found a way to make it through. You are the strongest person I have ever known." "Maybe," Helena allowed, "but I would not have thrived. I would not have been happy. You did not just save my life that day, Zachary. You gave me a life worth living." They stayed by the river until sunset, talking and laughing and simply being together. When they finally rode back to the ranch house, both felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life they had shared and the love that had sustained them through everything. Zachary lived to the age of 71, passing peacefully in his sleep on a warm summer night with Helena beside him. His last words to her, spoken that evening as they prepared for bed, were simple. "I love you. Always have, always will." Helena grieved deeply, as did their children and grandchildren. The funeral drew people from all over the region, a testament to the impact Zachary had made during his life. But even in her grief, Helena found comfort in the memories they had created and the family they had built. She lived another 12 years after Zachary's death, remaining active in the ranch operations and in the lives of her children and grandchildren. She often told stories about Zachary, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had not known him as well. On her 83rd birthday, surrounded by family in the ranch house she and Zachary had built, Helena reflected on her life. "I was 22 years old, standing in a freezing square, being sold like property," she said to her assembled family. "I had lost everything and saw no future beyond servitude and suffering. Then a cowboy I had never met walked up to that platform and paid everything he had. Not to own me, but to free me. And when the transaction was complete, when the paperwork gave him legal control over my life, he looked at me and said, 'Now you are priceless.'" She paused, looking around at her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. "He spent the rest of his life proving that truth, not just to me, but to everyone he met. He taught all of us that every person has worth, that love is about elevation rather than possession, that the best things in life cannot be bought or sold. I miss him every day, but I am so grateful for the time we had and the legacy we built together." Helena Dawson Orion passed away peacefully 2 weeks later in her sleep, with her children keeping vigil at her bedside. She was buried next to Zachary on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a simple marker that read, "Helena Dawson Orion, 1862–1945. Beloved wife, mother, and partner, priceless." The ranch remained in the family for generations, passed down through Henry's line. But more than the land or the cattle or the property, what endured was the story. The story of a woman who had nothing and a man who gave everything. The the story of love found in the most unlikely circumstances. The story of two people who chose each other and built something beautiful from the ashes of despair. Years later, when Helena's great-great-granddaughter stood in that same valley, now dotted with modern buildings but still beautiful, she thought about the courage it must have taken for both Zachary and Helena. For Helena to trust a stranger after everything she had been through. For Zachary to see past the transaction to the person. To recognize worth where society saw only debt and obligation. The lesson they had taught through their lives and their love echoed through the generations. That the true measure of a person is not what they own or their circumstances, but the choices they make and the love they give. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is extend kindness to a stranger. That everyone, regardless of where they start, has the capacity for an extraordinary life if given the chance. In the end, Zachary had been right. Helena was priceless, not because of what she could do or produce, but because of who she was. And in recognizing that truth and building a life around it, they had created something that transcended their individual lives. A legacy of love, respect, and human dignity that would endure long after they were both gone. The ranch still stood, the river still flowed, and the mountains still turned purple at sunset. And in the hearts of their descendants, the story lived on. A cowboy and a woman in a freezing square, and the love that changed everything.